Hi again, it's Greg Hughes from 90 Second Website Builder. In this video, I want to talk to you about the text tool. It's one of the most common, if not the most common tool you'll use when designing your website, because of course your website is mostly made up of text and images. So we're going to talk about here this text tool. So I'm going to grab the text tool by clicking on it in the toolbox and just drag a box like we've been doing with other things. And you can see I now have a text object on the canvas right here. Now there are three stages of selection. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to unselect it by clicking away outside of it. And now there's the text object, but it's not selected. You can tell because it's just, there's nothing around it. If I click on it once, the text object is now selected. You can tell by the little handlebars that appear. But I can also double click on this object like this, and now I enter what's called edit mode. This allows me to, of course, edit the text. I can use my arrow keys and get around, or I can use my mouse to drag and select text, or even double click on a particular piece of text to select it and do different formatting things with it. So there's three modes. It's unselected, selected, and now double click for edit mode. And that's basically how we use text. One of the things I want to show you is you'll notice at the top of my screen how my menus have been changing as I change modes. So right now the text is not selected, and you'll notice that my menu looks like this. But if I click once and select the object, not the text to edit it, but just select the object, you'll notice that I automatically get this text tools because I've selected a text object. And so that means at this mode I can move it around, drag it and drop it. And I can also access the properties for this object by clicking the properties button right here. That brings up the text properties where I could make some changes, all kinds of settings here and attributes I won't go into right now. But for example, if I clicked on the style tab, I could change the background mode of this object. I could have a text object that has a solid color background or an image behind it. Or I could set it to have some kind of a border. Now normally you're just going to use text with a transparent background, but you do have some options. You can change the way this text object looks if you want to. Shadows, everything else. Okay, but we're not going to do that right now. Let's just work with the text itself. But that's how we would get to the text properties. So again, this is unselected text. I've clicked away from it. Clicking once selects the object, the text object, and double clicking selects the text itself so that I can edit it. Now you'll notice when I double clicked and went into edit mode, my menus changed again. Now I have some formatting tools up here that weren't there when I was in just this mode. There's the text tools, double click now, and now look, I've got a whole new set of options under format because I'm ready to edit my text. That should be pretty clear, and that's really the basics of using text right there. Now I'm just going to select my text and do whatever I want with it. Well, what are those things? Well, of course I can copy, paste, and delete. Those are obvious, but I can also change the fonts. Now you'll notice when I pull down on the fonts window, you may wonder why not all of the fonts on your computer are showing up here. Well, 90 Second Website Builder is helping you. It's showing you just web-safe fonts that are on your computer. All of us have a different set of fonts on our computers because it's built into our Windows system, and your fonts will look different than mine, but most of us have the basics of web-safe fonts. And 90 Second Website Builder is only displaying those fonts on my system that are web-safe, that are web-friendly. And when you use text on a website, you want to try and use web-safe fonts as much as possible because it makes it easier for the end user to be able to see the site the way you intended it to be seen. So you may have some slightly different web-safe fonts in your menu based on what's built into your Windows, but you'll probably have the basics like Arial and Courier and Verdana and things like that. Okay, so that's why the limited number of fonts. Now, if you want to, you can show more non-web-safe fonts, but I wouldn't recommend it because it will make your site look different on some people's computers. In another video, we'll talk about how you can use some specialty fonts with your text, but we won't go into that now. Normally, you're just going to want to use web-safe fonts. So right now we're using Arial, and of course since the text is selected, I could change that font or I could change the size. So if I pull down to 12, you'll see of course it gets larger. I can also select an attribute for it. So if I select just this word and click on bold, I've now bolded that text. I can also double click on a word to select it. If I want to make it italicized, I can do that. So by double clicking and going into the edit mode, it lets me select text or even pieces of text that I may want to change the attribute of. So that includes changing the color of the text, the size, and the style. I can even highlight text. So for example, let me select this one word here and go up to the highlight, pick a color like say yellow, and now I've highlighted that text. And it could be any color I want. And of course I can change the color of text. Let me double click to select that word. And I could make this text be this red. Those should be pretty simple and pretty common, just basic Windows features on using text and formatting. But in 90-Second Website Builder, you have a whole set of tools that help you format your text so that it looks really clean and crisp, because there's a lot of different things you can do on your website. Now, the website I'm working on here is for a Blackwire hosting. This page isn't completely done, and so I'm just messing around with the text here. Now, you'll notice some of the things that I did. So down here, I have couple of different text objects. Here's a text object where I've got text that is red. Let me double click on it to enter edit mode so you can see. I'm going to select this text. You can see I made it red. I made it bold. I'm using Arial 14. This is one text object, so I can actually move this around. But this is another text object down here, and this I'm just using a regular. Let me double click on it so we can see it's Arial. And if I select this, it'll tell me I'm using Arial 10. And this is plain, it's not bold. But you'll notice this is underlined. That's because this is a hyperlink. We turn this part of the text into a hyperlink, and I'll show you how to do that in another video. But basically, it's easy to do. We're just going to select the text, and then we go make a link out of it. We'll talk about that later. But what I want you to see is that these are all different objects, all different text objects that have different formatting. So I like to keep my text in different chunks. So this is an object, this is an object. So they're all separate objects. It's a little bit easier to design with, and it makes your page load a little bit better when you do that. However, you can mix styles and sizes in the same text object when you need to. Here's another example of some text right here. Here's a very large piece of text. It's got two different styles in it. So I've got, on one hand, I have an Arial 28 that's bold here, and yet here I've got an Arial 48 that's bold and a completely different color. And this is one text object. Here's another sample of some text I did at the bottom of the page here, where I have, here's a title. This is one text object here. And then here are two text objects, because I didn't want a whole bunch of them, so I did two. I made a list here. This is one text object, and I put a little hyphen at the beginning. And then I have another text object here, and I could double click and edit those. Now you'll notice when I double clicked, some words are underlined. Well, that's because my spell checker, which is built into 90-Second Website Builder, is finding some words it really doesn't like. So let me show you how that works. So when I double click and enter edit mode, under my text tools, I of course have all these formatting tools, but I've also got a tab here called review. I can review my text, and you'll notice there are several options, and one of them is a spell checker. So since this text is now selected, since this text object is now selected, my spell checker can be clicked on, and it brings up the little dialog, and it says, you know what, I don't recognize that word, because technically that's two words, and it's asking me, do you want to change that? Well, I can say, yeah, I better change that to a two-word, and it'll fix it and move on to the next word that it doesn't like. It doesn't like the word Exum. That's actually a brand name, and it doesn't recognize it. Exum is a kind of email service that's built into servers, and so my dictionary doesn't know what that means. It thinks I want to change it to Exit. But Exum is correct, and I can tell the dictionary, you know what, that actually is a word that I use often in web hosting, so why don't you add that to your dictionary? And I'll click Add, and now that word will no longer exist as a misspelling. So basically that's how the spell checker works. It's built into 90-Second Website Builder. It's a great tool because it'll help you find all your mistakes. Anytime you see that red line, it's just telling you it's some words it wants you to check. So whenever we're using with text and we double click on it like this, it brings up all of these formatting tools, but also these other tools under review that let us do Google searches or translations or look up a word in a dictionary online. So this is a great new feature actually in the latest version of 90-Second Website Builder. Here's some text that you'll notice I changed to white. And the reason why I used white is because this text is inside a layer that's got a dark background. In fact, if I double click on the layer itself, we can see that the background is a gradient blue and black. And since it's dark and I want this text to show up, I basically selected it and made sure that it was white so that it shows up better, because out here, of course, it wouldn't show very well. So you have all of these different options in formatting your text. And again, it's one of the most common things you'll do. So it's a good idea to get used to using the text tool and learn all the different formatting functions and options that you have. Let me show you a couple other tricks that are just kind of not as common, but you may find them to be handy. So let's take some text here. Let me just take some sample text. We'll take this sentence up here, and I'm going to select it because it's white. It doesn't show very well. I'll change it to black so we can see it. And let's just work with this object. I'm going to bring it up here to the top of the page, just to use that as an example. I'm going to double click on this and select it and look at some of the formatting things I can do. Of course, it's left justified by doing this, or I can center justify it. Again, it has to be selected, and I can right justify it. And I might want to do that in case I was bumping it up against an image or whatever. Or I can even have full justification by, again, selecting the text, going like this, and now it's even on both ends of the margin. One of the great things about the 90-second website builder text tool is that your text will stretch and accommodate the size you want it to just by simply selecting the text now. And you can make your text be any width, and the text will accommodate the shape. That's been really an important design tool that you'll want to take advantage of. So let me double click again and select it. You can see there's other things we can do. If we want to add symbols to our text, we have a whole library of symbols. There's some more. If we click here, we'll bring all these symbols up in different fonts, have different styles of symbols. Another thing we can do is we can, if you had a whole bunch of text and you were looking for a particular phrase, there's a find and replace. This is called the Lorem Ipsum tool, which is kind of new. When you're making a template and you just want some filler text, so you don't really you haven't really thought about what your copy's going to say, but you still want the text in your web design just to see what it's going to look like, we can actually add dummy text. It's a Latin word for just, fake text. So I can say, hey, I want about 4 paragraphs of text to work with. And here I've got a bunch of text that I can work with. Let me stretch it around so that I can at least format my website with the text there and then later go back and fill in what I want it to say. But I can at least get the look or the layout of it. And of course, I can select that text and do different things with it. I'm hitting delete, backspace. So again, we'll double click so that we can access the formatting tools. And again, remember I said you can select a word, right click on it and turn it into a link. Another way we could do that is we could select a word and just go up here to the link tool and create a link for that. So those are the basics of using the text tool. It's really an important tool to know how to use, but it's also a really easy tool to know how to use so that you can make your website look really clean with this great tool in 90-second website builder.